going to be talking about the 5 reasons I think you should avoid publishing with IngramSpark. So we'll be talking about the cons of IngramSpark, but of course, as with any company, there's pros to IngramSpark as well. So when I talk about the pros to IngramSpark, I'm actually going to give you alternatives of other places that you can go to when you want those benefits that IngramSpark has without actually having to deal with IngramSpark. If you've been following me here on YouTube, you know recently I had an absolute utter fiasco with IngramSpark that made me swear them off forever. After doing that video, I did say in the video I will never be working with them again, but a lot of you guys pointed out that the pros that IngramSpark has are unignorable, so that's why I'm making today's video to let you know that you can find alternatives to IngramSpark in other places. So in this video, we're going to be talking about other print-on-demand companies besides IngramSpark, and I can't go into deep detail about all of them today. Just know I have an entire series of videos called The Beginner's Guide to Self-Publishing a Book, and in that series of videos, I go into detail of all the different print-on-demand companies. I review the quality of them. I go over how to upload your book to each company. So I go over things like KDP, Barnes & Noble Press, Lulu, Draft2Digital. They're all on there. I review them all. But today we're talking specifically about IngramSpark and some alternatives that we can have for IngramSpark. Hello everyone, my name is Mandi Lynn. I'm an author, book cover designer, and the creator of the Book Launch Planner series. And if you like weekly videos on the business of being an author, then make sure to subscribe and hit that bell notification icon so you never miss a new upload. Alright, so before I start talking into alternatives of IngramSpark, I want to talk about the reasons why you should be avoiding them. Reason number 1 is that their printing cost is just generally more expensive than any other print-on-demand company. If you take the same exact book and you print it with IngramSpark, Barnes & Noble Press, KDP, all of those, usually IngramSpark ends up being the most expensive. And reason number 2 is that their royalty rates are also higher as well. Now granted, you can kind of play around with your royalty rates for IngramSpark, and it's not necessarily that you're playing around with the royalty rate, you're playing around with the wholesale discount. So typically IngramSpark encourages you to give a 55% wholesale discount, but if you do that, you end up only making maybe a couple cents per book sale. But if you set it to something much lower, like 30% wholesale discount, you end up making a couple dollars. So it does have that flexibility, but the whole point of IngramSpark is usually to get expanded distribution, and if you want bookstores to buy your book, they might not want to buy your book if you don't have a big wholesale discount. So it's like an endless cycle, but obviously you tend to make the least amount of money when you publish your book on IngramSpark because of that wholesale discount. Reason number 3 to avoid them, and I think it's a very big reason, their customer service is awful. And when I say awful, I mean borderline non-existent. Now, if you watched my most recent video on IngramSpark where I talk about the absolute nightmare fiasco I had with them recently when I tried to do paperback pre-orders for my book, you'll learn that 9 times out of 10, they respond with a copy and paste email that is not helpful in any way possible. And usually it takes a couple days for that copy and paste email to show up. And there is no phone support, and there's kind of sort of phone support that you can pay for, but I actually don't think it's customer support. Anyways, I'm not going to go into details with all of it, but please watch my YouTube video on the whole situation. It's kind of a long story, but basically what ended up happening is IngramSpark was misprinting 25 copies of my book during the pre-order process and was like shipping them out, but not actually shipping them out. They were just printing them, and they wouldn't let me upload new files. And it was this whole thing. Reason number 4 to avoid them is that their interface isn't user-friendly at all. So they've done a lot of work in the recent years to actually make their interface a little bit more user-friendly, but it's still not user-friendly. Like, it looks prettier when you go to upload things like the dashboard and all that. It looks nicer, But the thing is IngramSpark has very specific rules and very specific ways you can screw up, and they don't make it inherently obvious. Hence why I got into the whole pre-order fiasco with my books. Because it used to be that you could upload dummy files of your book to do a pre-order for your book, and then as long as you uploaded the final files 10 business days before the release of your book, that was fine. That's how it used to be. And then at some point, they changed that where they just start printing your book right away. As soon as the first pre-order comes in, they start printing the book. So you can no longer upload dummy files. You have to upload the final files of your book. And if you're self-published, odds are you don't have the final files of your book ready until like right before the release of the book, which makes it basically impossible to do print pre-orders for your book. But what I'm trying to say is they have rules, but they don't really make the rules clear. You have to go digging on their website to kind of suss things out and figure it out for yourself. Like during the uploading process, they don't tell you any of this. It's all on their like help forum that you have to go searching through yourself. And reason number 5 is that their shipping just takes forever. So I don't know how it is for customers, but I know for myself as an author, if I order my books to be printed through IngramSpark to get author copies for myself, it can take literally weeks. And I don't know any other print-on-demand company that's like that. So those are all the reasons to avoid publishing with IngramSpark. But of course, we do know that they have some nice features that some authors just can't resist. So we're going to be talking about those nice features today and, some alternatives to still avoid IngramSpark. So reason number 1 why people do like IngramSpark is the quality of their books. The quality of their books is fantastic. Their books are beautiful. Other print-on-demand company books are just as good now and sometimes even better. Like in my opinion, the case laminate that KDP produces versus the case laminate that IngramSpark produces, I think the KDP one is a little bit nicer. But that could also be personal preference. I know people used to have issues with KDP misprinting their books, and I personally have actually had this issue where like I opened my book and instead of it being the title page, it was actually chapter 1, and then I turned the page again and then it was the title page, and I don't know how it happened, but my book got misprinted. And that hasn't happened in years. I haven't had issues with KDP and stuff like that in years. However, I have heard of people who order hardcover jackets through IngramSpark. They get their hardcover book and it literally is just plain missing the jacket. All I'm trying to say is if you turn to IngramSpark because their printing quality, it's kind of a level playing field now where everyone is kind of at the same range of printing quality, except I would say Lulu. Lulu kind of sucks, at least when it comes to color printing. But everyone else I would say is pretty level. And Barnes & Noble Press specifically actually uses the same exact printer as IngramSpark, so their printing quality is completely equal. So if you really, really like the quality for IngramSpark, just go to Barnes & Noble Press instead. They actually have somewhat customer service. Another reason people tend to turn to IngramSpark is because they print hardcover books. Well, I'm happy to say that they're not the only ones that print hardcover books now. KDP also prints hardcover books. I made an entire video about it when it first happened. I made a review on the IngramSpark hardcover versus the KDP hardcover and my thoughts on the quality and all that. And I did say earlier that I think the KDP hardcovers are a little bit nicer, like the case laminate. And case laminate is just the design that's printed directly onto the hardcover, whereas a jacketed book, like this one right here, this one I know was printed through IngramSpark, has a jacket and then a case laminate. So when I say that the case laminate for KDP is a little bit nicer, and this is personal preference, what I mean is that on the spine of the KDP case laminate, there is this little roping. I'm not quite sure what it's called, but it just looks a little nicer, whereas the IngramSpark one does not. It's just kind of glued in. So again, it might be personal preference, but wanted to point it out. If you really want a hardcover and you don't mind not having a jacket, definitely just go with KDP. The quality is great. The cost to print a hardcover is still pretty good. Of course, it's still going to be more expensive than a paperback. And KDP is just so much nicer to work with, in my opinion. Now, I know what you're thinking. I don't want a hardcover without a jacket. That's just weird. Obviously, in the traditionally published world, if I look at my shelf of hardcover books, every single one of them, almost every single one of them, has a jacket. You want to blend in, you want to look like a traditionally published book. I get it. So if you really, really want that jacket on your hardcover, go to Barnes & Noble Press. Like I said earlier, they use literally the same exact printer as IngramSpark, except now you're working with Barnes & Noble Press instead. Now, the biggest bummer with working with Barnes & Noble Press is that means your book is just on Barnes & Noble. So if people want to buy your book, they either have to go to Barnes & Noble and request a copy of your book, because odds are it's not going to just be sitting on the shelf at Barnes & Noble. That's not how that works. Or they can go to barnesandnoble.com and order your book there. That's probably where 99% of your orders for your hardcover would come in anyways. So I know it sounds like a bummer because now your book is only sold through Barnes & Noble, or at least the hardcover edition is. But kind of see it as a bright side, because we see authors, traditionally published authors, do Barnes & Noble exclusive editions all the time. So you could kind of embrace that a little bit and say, you know, I have a Barnes & Noble exclusive edition of my book. Purchase it at barnesandnoble.com. That's the only place where you can get a hardcover edition of my book. And you can just kind of have fun with it instead of being bummed out by the fact that you don't have the expanded distribution and that the book wouldn't be for sale on Amazon.com, which we all know is kind of where most of book sales tend to come in these days. Another reason why people tend to turn to IngramSpark is for their print book pre-orders. Now, we all know it's pretty easy to do ebook pre-orders. I find the process for ebook pre-orders extremely simple. The process for paperback pre-orders, not so simple. I thought I had it figured out with IngramSpark, but as you guys know, if you watched my other IngramSpark video, they changed the way they do their paperback pre-orders or print book pre-orders now. So the only way to do print book pre-orders through IngramSpark now is to upload the final files of your book. I don't have ever the final files of my book prepared until maybe like a month before the book's release. And that's just a really, really short pre-order period. And at that point, it's like, what's the point? Now, the alternative, if you really want to do print book pre-orders, is again to use Barnes & Noble Press. They will allow you to do print book pre-orders. Just be super, super aware that you have to upload the final files at least 10 business days ahead of time. The sooner you upload those final files, the better. Barnes & Noble Press is a little finicky. They don't make that deadline super clear. So just be very, very self-aware of how much time you have left. And like I said, the sooner you can upload those final files, the better. I personally find that it is no longer worth the stress of doing print book pre-orders. So my recommendation to you is to actually skip it entirely. It's not that big of a deal. Just have fun on your release day when the print book is available, and don't worry about doing print book pre-orders. It's not worth the stress. Another place you can go to for print book pre-orders is Draft to Digital, but they're still very, very new at doing print books. I am aware that they allow you to do pre-orders. I just have not tried them out myself. I personally feel they haven't been printing books long enough to be a reliable source for a print-on-demand company. Now, for ebooks, they're fantastic. They've been doing ebooks for years and years. They're great. For print books, they're very new. They got to work out the kinks. I personally wouldn't go near them right now, but it might be something you want to look into. And the last thing, the biggest reason why people go to IngramSpark is because they have expanded distribution. And when I say expanded distribution, I don't mean just that your book will be available online more or less everywhere, but I also mean that if you're an author who it's very, very important to you to have your book in like indie bookstores or for Barnes & Noble to be able to order your book, or if you want to be able to have it so libraries can order copies of your book, sometimes the only way to have that type of distribution is to work with IngramSpark. So that's probably the only one that we don't have an alternative for. Because many libraries and many indie bookstores will tell you that they literally cannot order a copy of your book unless it is published and distributed through IngramSpark. So that is something a lot of indie authors get caught up on, because especially at the beginning of your career, it's kind of a bucket list thing to see your book on a bookshelf. I totally get it. I've been there. I've done that. So if that's super, super important to you, then unfortunately you will have to work with IngramSpark. That's the only one I don't have a workaround with. And if you do end up going that route, hold on, because I'm going to give you guys some tips with working with IngramSpark in a little bit. But I do want to give you some slight alternatives to getting your book into stores without having to worry about having the expanded distribution. A lot of the times, independent bookstores will do what is called consignment, where you physically bring in copies of your book, you guys come up with a consignment contract, and basically on that contract you determine how long your books will be there for, how much money you'll make per book sold, and after that determined time frame of how long your books will be there, you'll be asked to come and pick up the remaining copies of your book if they don't sell. So this allows you to order stock of your own book, bring it physically to the store, leave it there. Usually it's 3 to 6 months. And then you can make sales that way. And you have this contract, and you don't make any money until you actually sell the books. Now, I've done consignment in the past. I'm not a huge fan of it because it's just a lot to keep track. And usually the bookstore owner also isn't really good at keeping track of it. So you have to make sure you as the author keep good track. So you really have to make sure you follow up with the bookstore to be like, hey, did you sell any copies of my book? Hey, can I come pick up those copies of my book? Because I've just kind of have it where myself and the book owner forget about the entire consignment contract, and it basically ends up where I donated copies of my book to the bookstore, which whoops. But yeah, so that is an option if you want to put your books on consignment at a bookstore. So I would only say that's an option for smaller bookstores. Usually the bigger the bookstore, the less likely they'll be to be wanting to do consignment. Or you can do book signings where you bring stocks of your book to the bookstore, you sell the books on only one day, and then you take whatever books don't sell home with you. Sometimes the bookstore will let you keep your books there forever until all the rest of them sell out. Sometimes they'll let you keep them there for another week. It really depends. What I'm saying is if it's really important for you to have your book at a bookstore, just go to your local bookstore and see what they're willing to do for you. They're very willing to work with local authors because they want to make money too, and having fun events like that is a great way to do it. And then if you want to see your book in your local library, just donate a copy of your book. It's not that big of a deal. And I know you're not making money this way, but if you donate a copy of your book and other people read your book, hopefully they'll review your book online, and that still helps you with sales in the long run. We all know the more reviews you have for your book, the better. So it is another alternative. All right, so let's say you've learned everything you've learned about IngramSpark and you still want to go with them for whatever reason, probably for expanded distribution, because like I said, there's really no alternative for expanded distribution when it comes to IngramSpark. So if you really do want to work with IngramSpark, my tip is to publish your book somewhere else first, most likely KDP, because KDP is the most forgiving and easiest to use. They're the easiest place to update your files if you have any issues. Publish your book first on KDP, finalize and perfect everything there, and then once it's perfect on KDP, go ahead and upload it and publish it to IngramSpark. And the reason why I say this is just because IngramSpark, like I said, extremely finicky and not very forgiving when you need to update your files. For one thing, after 60 days, you actually have to pay a fee every time you need to update your files, and that's $25 if you have to update the cover and $25 if you have to update the interior files. If you make those updates within 60 days, there's no fee, but after 60 days, there will always be a fee. Not only that, but I learned the hard way that if your book is consistently selling, you actually get locked out of being able to upload new files of your book, which is where my nightmare came in hand because I was having a pre-order for my book. Everyone was pre-ordering for the book, and IngramSpark wouldn't let me update the files until they printed and shipped the orders for the book, and then they would accept the new files. So it's just very annoying. So basically, if your book is selling consistently on IngramSpark, they won't let you update your files, which is really annoying. So yeah, just make sure your files are as perfect as possible when you go to publish them on IngramSpark. Otherwise, you should be more or less fine, but really the updating of files on IngramSpark is the biggest issue, along with the lack of customer support. Anyways, I feel like I've talked a lot today, so that is it for this video. Thank you all for watching. If you have any other alternatives to IngramSpark or ways that we can accomplish expanded distribution without having to go to IngramSpark, let me know in the comments down below, because I'd love to hear if you guys have any other ideas of other places that we can go to or other alternatives. Otherwise, I will see you all next week.